Welcome to Smart Helping. I'm Jay. We're going to go over gross profit. This is a little tricky. It's an accounting term. It's something when you analyze income statements, it's a very important measure. And so we're going to try to talk about it here. At the highest level, gross profit is simply your revenue minus cost of goods sold. When you get a little bit deeper, it's not just cost of goods sold. It's essentially your variable cost. So any cost that scales directly with revenue generation, which means the selling of your product or service, anything that you have to can directly tie to your ability to produce and sell products and or um, provide a service. So the highest level is, let's say you're selling cars, okay? Your revenue is the total revenue you make from selling the cars. Your cost of goods sold is the cost of the cars, and your gross profit is the revenue minus that cost. And then your gross profit margin is just that gross profit amount divided by the total revenue. Then you have fixed expenses, and you have operating income. You could also have a break-even analysis based on, if 35% is my variable cost, then my break-even revenue here based on this fixed would be 2,692, which is essentially just taking the um, fixed expenses divided by 1 minus your variable, which is essentially saying, okay, if I know that no matter how much revenue I make, my variable costs are going to be 35%, and inherently my gross margins are 65% then, and my fixed expenses are 1750, then for me just to break even, I need to make $2,692 in sales. So you can see this variable cost piece is the best way to think about it is any cost that directly scales with revenue. So if you're a manufacturer, and you're selling and producing things that, you have direct labor costs where people are working in the factory to produce the product. That is a variable cost. If you've got machinery that is required, the depreciation expense on that is a variable cost. So manufacturing gets a little bit more in depth with this calculation, and it becomes less obvious. For general, like a SaaS business or other just retail businesses, your variable costs are just what you have to pay for that is directly related to producing revenue. If you paint your building, that is not a variable cost, because how does um, you know if you produce 10 widgets a day and you paint your building green, that has building being green has nothing to do with your production of widgets whatsoever. Um, one tricky there's some nuance here though. There's or caveats. Like if you have commissions that you pay to your salespeople based on the things that they sell, that can be a variable cost, because as revenue grows, you're going to have to be paying a percentage of commissions to these salespeople, so that is going to grow with revenue. It's not just going to be fixed, and that's kind of where you see the fixed versus variable identification. Your gross profit is really how much money is your business really making before having to pay for all the overhead that's required to just support ongoing operations and administrative things. That's really the margin's really important to know there, because um, and it can be compared. So if you're looking at a gross profit margin of 65% and gross profit of $6,500, and then you compare it to a different period where, let's say, the gross profit's um, higher. Let me move this percentage out of the way real quick. Let's say you were able to produce $10,000 in revenue and your cost of goods sold was only $2,000. Well, this is very good, but what if your cost of goods sold was actually, what if you made more revenue, and however your cost of goods sold was higher proportionally? which is what the gross profit is measuring. So this is saying, well, you've made more gross profit, which is good, but your margin is shrinking, which means if you can't just assume you're going to make 65% of every dollar, um, you know, or essentially you're going to make 65 cents on every dollar spent to produce whatever you're selling or to provide the service. And then so I spend a dollar, I have a dollar 65 back. Is that $65 going to be able to cover my fixed expenses? And does it shrink over time? So here it's saying now I spend a dollar, I actually only have $57 for every dollar spent. And so, or for every dollar made of revenue, I only have $57 left. Now you've made more revenue, you've scaled, but the margin is shrinking. Now what if it goes to like, and when you're trying to forecast a business, let's say they now make 100,000, you have no idea what the gross profit margin might be. And now if it's high, if it's going up with revenue, that's a good thing. That means you're becoming more efficient, or you're able to get a bit better production if you're a manufacturer out of your equipment compared to what you're selling. So it gets tricky, but essentially the best way to describe it is your gross profit is your revenue less any expenses directly tied to providing a product, or I mean selling a product or providing a service. And it's scale. Think scale. What scales up with revenue or down, and what expenses, and those are variable costs, and then you got gross profit, and don't include fixed expenses like paying your legal team or upgrading your parking lot. There's just regular things that just are day to day that aren't related to you producing something. So that's how to distinguish, and hopefully this helped you when just thinking about what gross profit is, how to calculate it, and what things might fall into the expenses that you need to tie into revenue in order to calculate gross profit. And you'll see notes like auditors and all this stuff, classification of things, and being able to justify is where accounting gets real gray because of what you're justifying and what you're using to justify or back up that claim, and if it makes sense or not. Okay, that's all I got for now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want. Also, join the live stream every Monday at 5. If you want to be a member of the channel, it's $4.99 a month, and you can talk in the chat. Give me suggestions. I'll build stuff right there live on Google Sheets or Excel. No, mostly I do financial models for all different industries, bottom-up models, or maybe tools, tracking tools for HR, or general just business tools. I do all kinds of stuff. So, all right, we'll see you on the next one.